Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We're headed into our final segment of the day, and I wanted to do a little something on Kevin Durant's legacy. As you know, the Suns were swept over the weekend by the Minnesota Timberwolves. It was, frankly, a pretty pathetic outing from the Suns, where it wasn't just that they got outplayed, but I thought that they got outworked, and they just never really had any sense of desperation. It felt like Suns fans sort of felt that as well, and, you know, there was a brief period during the regular season where it felt like, okay, maybe now they're all sort of starting to figure one another out, and that they're coming together, they understand their roles. But even then, there were some glaring issues with the team. Depth was always an issue for them. That's why they made the series of moves that they did at the trade deadline. Ended up bringing in Royce O'Neal to really be, that big bench piece. But they offloaded a couple other guys who, weren't tremendous necessarily. But I also felt like they gave some solid minutes at time. Either way, though, the bench was never in a great spot. The fact that they never had a legitimate point guard, and amidst all these sort of rumors about what's going to happen next with Frank Vogel as their head coach, I believe this was his first season in Phoenix. Feel free to fact check me if that's not true, but that's why I also feel like it's kind of ridiculous, the idea of firing him after 1 year, as if there's anything he really could have changed, especially with the stories that are coming out that he sort of argued with the front office that they needed a legitimate point guard, and they never actually addressed that. So as a result, they were, and we've talked about this plenty of times on the show throughout the course of the year, they were just so reliant on their individual scorers to make stuff happen. And the shot making from specifically Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. And this issue was baked into the fact that they were a horrendous fourth quarter team. They had the worst net rating in the NBA in the fourth quarter this season. Their offense just continually dried up. They were actually 10th in the NBA in the regular season in offensive rating as a whole, but they were last in the offensive rating in the fourth quarter, which drastically weighed them down. And it's because when these games got a little bit clunkier and sort of came down to these late game executions, it's just, game slows down, and you would think that to some degree the Kevin Durant and the Devin Bookers specifically would be able to get theirs, but it gets tiring after a while, and we saw some of these instances. I believe the Chicago Bulls game is the one that really stood out to me, where Kevin Durant had that double clutch mid-range jump shot. There was a Kings comeback along in that same time period as well. I feel like I'm talking like January, February-ish that these games stuck out to me. But, it was really difficult for them to time after time just lean on the backs of specifically those two players, because this was a bad Bradley Beal season. And I remember I just got into an argument, a few weeks ago about one of my friends. Bradley Beal is not close to being an all-star player anymore, and that doesn't mean that he hasn't had a very solid career, but bringing him in, and I understand to some degree, the fact that they got him for just about nothing, so the risk reward in that sense wasn't, it wasn't like they were moving off of anything, but the risk is now that you are stuck with a Bradley Beal who's going to be making over $50 million per year for each of the next 3 seasons, and the way that Game 4 ended was absolutely terrible. He was really bad down the stretch of that game, and the Suns team was just a mess generally. And ultimately, now the Suns get worked in this series, and it falls a lot on the shoulders of Kevin Durant, who has now been swept in the first round twice since leaving the Warriors. And a lot of questions sort of start to arise about what is Kevin Durant's legacy going to look like moving forward. I think that Shannon Sharpe had a quote. Now, this could have been aggregated, so if there's more of a big picture here, I apologize, but he said along the lines that Kevin Durant's going to be remembered for getting swept in the first round. And I just think that that is a ridiculous statement because his legacy is not going to be looked at in the same light that it deserves because of how good of a player he is. But when he made that decision to join the Golden State Warriors in 2016, I think was the offseason that he joined there following the Cavs comeback. That was the 2016 finals, so I believe it was 2016 that Kevin Durant decided to sign with the Warriors. Once he did that, nobody was going to ever really give him the respect that he deserved unless he was able to rattle off post-Warriors championships, because a lot of people don't even give him credit for winning the finals those 2 years he was there. He would have won 3 finals if it weren't for the fact that he and Klay Thompson both got injured in 2019. But this is one of the most gifted individual players we have ever seen, at least from my perspective. I think he's the best pure scorer I have ever seen. Now, that list of, again, I understand reference-wise, maybe if you are an older fan, you're going to be pissed at me for saying this, but at least from, the 21st century when I've been watching the NBA, it is Kevin Durant, LeBron's on the list, of course, Steph Curry's on the list, Kobe Bryant's on the list. I'd maybe even sneak in Kyrie Irving there, but Durant is, the player who can do it all, where he obviously knows how to pick his spots in the mid-range, one of the best mid-range shooters of all time. With his length, he can get to the rim. With the size that he plays at, being able to shoot outside the way he does, he is the 8th all-time leading scorer. Out of the top 50 scorers of all time, only Steph Curry has a higher true shooting percentage than Kevin Durant. I just decided to go to the first page of the NBA.com and scroll down to the whole first page, which has 50. I bet if I continued my search there, it would still be hard to find anybody who shot better than he did. We know how great of a scorer he is, 4-time scoring champ, 10-time All-NBA, 14-time All-Star, 2-time Finals MVP in 2013-14. You know all of the accolades anyways, so there's not really much point in me diving into these specifically. But generally here with Kevin Durant, I understand that the look of him joining the team that just came back against him in the prior playoffs 3-1 is not a good look. And I hated Kevin Durant for hated him for a handful of years following that, because frankly he did kind of ruin the NBA for a bit there, where no matter how good any other team was, it was a foregone conclusion that the Warriors were going to win the finals as long as they were healthy, and that's exactly how it played out during his 3 years there. But ultimately, that decision just sort of did him in so wrong, even though the fact that from a, basketball perspective, there was an opportunity, the way that the cap space was jumping in that off season anyways, he chose to go to basketball heaven, where it was the best possible situation for him from a basketball perspective, and he decided to do so, and he was the best player on those teams, as good as Steph Curry is. And, he's also up there in terms of, Hall of Fame talents, undoubtedly. But at least in those seasons that Kevin Durant was with Steph Curry, he was the better player. And, I feel like if in life, all of us would prefer to be in the best possible work situation that brings us joy, and that's what Kevin Durant did. Now, it was a little bit rocky at times. Obviously, the Draymond Green situation wasn't ideal for him, but he then left that incredible situation in Golden State because of Draymond Green some, but also because he knew he was never going to get the respect he deserved if he stuck it out in Golden State. So if he did re-sign with the Warriors and they did win another 2, 3, 4 finals, then still nobody would give him any credit for that. And obviously, he ends up tearing his Achilles in the 2019 finals, so he would have been out for the 1920 season anyways. He would have come back in 2021, and it would have been a different picture. He would have been 32 years old at that point. He wouldn't have been quite at the peak of his powers. But I just feel like Kevin Durant, the second he signed with the Warriors, in terms of how will his legacy be remembered, he sort of did himself in. Fair or unfair? I do lean that it is a little bit unfair, because I just feel like he doesn't get, the respect he deserves. But at the same time, we've seen situations in sports. It's basketball, but we've also seen it in football. And, sort of to the basketball example of it, we saw LeBron James kind of, for his own sake, have to leave Cleveland. I'm specifically referring to the second time. First time was totally deserved. The Cavs organization didn't do him any favors. Went to Miami, then came back to Cleveland, and by the end of that second Cleveland stint for LeBron, the GM had tanked the team, asking them to give out all of these contracts to Tristan Thompson and to J.R. Smith, and Kyrie Irving was on his way out, and there was never enough help. They constantly had to make all of these different moves, so it was a constant cycle for them there. And in order for him to have a chance to continue winning, he had to move to LA. And I feel like there's a little bit of similarities in this case in terms of Kevin Durant. He went from hitching his wagon to Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, two of the Hall of Fame players. Steph Curry, one of the best players of all time and one of the best teammates of all time. And he decided to hitch his wagon to a Kyrie Irving and James Harden, where neither of them, and it's been great to see the resurgence of Kyrie in terms of actually focusing on the game and being committed to the team, and actually, being healthy, for another fact as well. But, those were the partners that Kevin Durant chose to go into business with, and it was a bad business decision. And then the ask out to Phoenix, still also, I understand wanting to get out of that Phoenix situation, especially because of the fact that Kyrie had just asked out, and I feel like Kevin Durant probably could have stuck it out and tried to make it work a little bit better, but it was such a tumultuous run there in Brooklyn anyways that I can understand it to some degree. But then to say, basically, I don't want this to be a free market. I want to go to Phoenix, and that's it. And the Suns ended up giving away all of their supplementary pieces in order to get him. And, now we're looking at this a year later, they make an additional Brad Beal trade, and they are just a mess. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, because Durant, his legacy obviously isn't done just yet, but he's going to be 36 years old next season. I don't know what the Suns can really do, keeping everything to run it back and be a success story next year. I feel like either Durant is probably going to be the one to get moved. Everybody says just trade Brad Beal, but no other team wants Brad Beal. And the Suns don't have any draft capital to sort of, sweeten the deal and try and make it easier to take on that type of money. But I don't know. I just feel like generally here with the Suns, they are a little bit in purgatory, and I would assume that it's going to be a Durant trade as opposed to a Booker trade. Now, they could definitely get more value for Booker, but that's kind of all they have going for them in the near future, unless they feel like Booker's going to want his way out. And in that case, is Durant even going to still want to be there either? So who knows what goes on there. I will say this, the fact that Durant was so sort of picky about his situation there in Phoenix and said that he didn't really feel like he was being utilized right and how his fit was. Durant's supposed to be a player that you can sort of plug into any system, and he's going to be an effective offensive player. And it's not like he wasn't an effective offensive player this season. You know, he still averaged 27 points per game on 52-41 shooting splits, which is really impressive. But at the same time, I don't know, the complaining after the fact, I don't feel like is a great look for him either. But definitely let me know in the comment section how you feel about Kevin Durant's legacy. That is all the time we have, though, for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Check us out on socials for more exclusive content as well. But on that note, that is all we have for today. We will be back 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon Eastern Time. We will see you then.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.